We're going to hand the mic back. We've got another presentation or two, and then we're going to do some more networking because we know you guys really like that. And then we'll come back for a little more educational stuff and then end the night with a lot more networking. Sounds good? Say, yeah, baby. Yeah, baby.
Anyways, guys, let's shift gears. We got a keynote speaker coming up on stage. We've got Joe Medioli speaking on behalf of Anchorage Digital. Thank you for sponsoring this beautiful, exclusive, and intimate event here at Dallas, Texas. Real quick, before you take the mic from me, I just want to give you a brief intro so people know who exactly you are as well, sir. So speaking on behalf of Anchorage Digital is Joe Medioli, their go-to growth and strategy lead. Joe drives strategy for the firm's institutional client solutions and brings over a decade of experience advising financial institutions on digital asset strategy and compliance from his previous role at Promontory Financial. So Joe is a seasoned veteran. He advises crypto native firms on executing strategic licensing initiatives and building regulatory compliance, risk, and compliance programs. Let's give Joe a round of applause, everyone. Thank you, Joe. Hopefully I didn't butcher that.
You're good. Thank you, Ray.
Absolutely.
All right. Hi, everybody. Good evening. Looking back the last couple of speeches in the panel, you can... Oh, there we go. Reflecting a little bit on the last couple of speeches and the panels, and you can hear from my own background. I'm one of these people who's a convert from TradFi. I spent my whole career before Anchorage Digital in the reg advisory space and management consulting space. So working with GSIBs, banks, broker-dealers on risk and compliance initiatives. And how I worked my way into this space is a little bit of the story I want to tell tonight, because it's why I came to Anchorage Digital and why we're building the products and services for wealth managers and family offices and really just institutional participants we are today. So about 3-4 years ago, after a long time in this space, call it 2020, 2021, we started hearing rumors, right, from the large banks. Hey, what about this crypto thing? And very similar to what Aaron Fries mentioned earlier, as a consulting firm and as a consultant, I was in a position to be working with some of the largest institutions in the world, trillion-dollar institutions, trying to figure out how to establish risk management practices. There we go. How to establish risk management practices looking at crypto. Now, what was really interesting about that point in time is that the exact same time the banks were looking at that, we had state financial services regulators trying to figure out the same thing. Right? Wyoming, really big pioneer in this space. We're looking at consultants and ex-regulators to say, we want a regime. We want this asset class. How are we going to build this, right? And so my firm and my team, right, we were sitting in between this moment in time where banks were trying to design risk programs. Regulators were asking us, how should we design regulatory regimes? And then we have crypto firms trying to figure out, how do we do this in a compliant way? So we had this sort of a moment, this flash in the pan, where we got to see all sides of this industry at once. And there were really a handful of players out there that were trying to take the step forward from being tech companies that engaged in blockchain to really figuring out, how do we do this in a space, in a manner that's compliant? And that brought me to Anchorage Digital. Now, for those of you who don't know what Anchorage is, we are a global institutional crypto platform. And what that means is we provide custody, we provide settlement, trading services, we provide staking and governance, and a whole host of technical jargon things that I'll avoid for the time being at Jacob's note. But what's really important about that is that on top of the tech stack that we've built and the security infrastructure around this, we took a regulatory forward approach. And in the United States, we are unique. We went through the process of converting our original legal entity into what is the first and still only federally regulated national trust bank that is crypto native. That is huge. It was a momentous effort. It has not been replicated. And it was from that foundation that we really started to look seriously at the family office and wealth management space. So why am I indexing on that? We are a qualified custodian in a black letter 40 Act definition manner. It is the most regulatory clarity we can have in a world of lack of regulatory clarity in terms of supporting this space. And when we looked at that, and I came in the firm as part of a wave of folks coming from traditional financial services, we said, we're not doing enough for this space. We do a ton of work with crypto native companies and the VC companies that support them. But there's this whole world out there of institutional investors and their underlying clients who want access to this space. We're an institutional only firm. We don't have a retail brokerage. We don't onboard individuals. But we needed to figure out a way to expose and provide the custody, the regulatory perimeter, and all of the infrastructure we've built down to those end investors. And so we took this deliberate approach over 2 years to go ground up. How do we look at this from the eyes of an advisor who has to stand in front of the SEC and go through their compliance exams, right? How do we make sure that if a client is coming to them and wants to allocate to crypto, that they can get their statements on a minimum quarterly basis, right? We really looked at this step by step. And as we sort of figured out the framework, we realized there was nobody else in the market doing this. Sure, other people had things that looked like SMAs or maybe sort of a hybrid retail institutional approach, but nobody brought all of these pieces together. And so the next question is, how real is this market, right? Where is the interest? And when we started talking to wealth managers and doing our own research, right, what did we find? We found what many of you in this room already know, right? There was a dip in organic growth over a couple of years, and people were hungry for a way to rebuild this. How do we spur this growth? One way is to differentiate yourselves, right? Let's get access to an asset class that we know our clients already have. We saw this from banks as well. We see deposits going to places like Coinbase or Kraken or Gemini, these exchanges, right? How do we bring this back in-house? And then the question was, well, what about the utility, right? And you're going to hear a lot of people tonight talk about the different ways you can sort of generate yield or income through crypto. Even at a more basic level, these are hugely volatile assets, right? If you have them in the right infrastructure, you can do things like tax loss harvesting, right? Stuff that hasn't really been done in crypto yet in a meaningful way. And so as we looked at this market, we took advice and partnership from our clients. We took this sort of very methodical approach. Is it perfect? No. As everyone said, we are in, the second inning of this space, right? If I think of crypto as an iPhone, we're at like iPhone 3, right? We've got a ways to go, right? 15 just came out. But the important thing to take away from this is that, our whole ethos, the way we approach this market, the way we look at our own partners, right? The liquidity providers that we use for brokerage, the third parties that we use to do tax reporting, right? We look at this as any bank would for any other alternative asset class, and we want to meet our clients where they are. We're security professionals, we're risk professionals, we're compliance professionals. We know custody. We're not portfolio managers, so we want to meet you where you are. And when we think about where this ecosystem is going, I agree with what was said on the last panel, right? We're at a world right now of store of value. Where this is going is on-chain everything, to the point that if my parents are investing in crypto or investing in a fixed income, they're not going to know whether there's a blockchain or not. They don't care. They shouldn't care, right? I want this to look and feel just like the experience they get through their advisor today, their Schwab account, their Fidelity account. However it looks and feels, that's how seamless this should work. We're a long way from there, but we're one of the people that are trying to drive this forward in the industry, and we do that with our partners. So I'll be talking a little bit more about some of the nuances of Anchorage security on one of the later panels, but I'd encourage all of you, anybody who has questions on this. Custody is a really complex topic, despite being a very basic premise in this ecosystem. Happy to talk about that, and you can reach out to my colleague Ben in the room as well. Look forward to more.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Joe.